just to see the reaction I would get, or he would get from me. So I've discovered that he was actually doing that on purpose all these years.
Bait.
Is that all you're going to give us all day as one word? So this interview is about David, isn't it?
David Bennett. David Bennett, you started here 20 years ago when I started. We started
21.
together.
Whoa. We all started.
This is our 21st year.
This is our 20th year.
21st.
No, it's 21st. He's right, because
Is it
next year's
21st?
my 20th year.
21st.
And my 20th year was a year after you guys came.
It's the 21st year.
Yeah, he's right.
I don't believe it.
It's been that long, John. You are that old.
I just started here in 2003.
Yeah.
You started here in
And it's
2003,
2024.
So 2024.
24 minus 3 is 21.
Yeah. But
That would be
21st,
a quick
20th.
free lesson in math
school
for
year.
Mr. Bennett.
You know, John, you're getting technical here.
No,
John,
21.
John, we all started around the
21
same
now.
time. It's been about
Whatever.
20 years.
Whatever.
Well-
you started 2 weeks late, apparently.
2 weeks late, yes, and I got all those great courses.
I already had the dog's breakfast when I started.
I got the dogs after
Breakfast.
David got the dog's
leftovers of the
entrails.
dog's breakfast.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
That
What was your load?
I had Math Essentials 8, Math Essentials 9, Socials 8,
Oh, yeah, it's socials.
Uh,
You had planning.
Drama 8.
Didn't you have
two
planning?
blocks of
You taught socials.
socials and English.
And
English.
drama. That's the key. The drama is
Well,
the key.
I had that too. I had CAP, which was
yes.
drama combined with careers.
Health careers or
You had
something
that
like
too?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really weird.
I think you passed it on to me the following year.
Did I?
Yes. When you
So when you taught socials, did you use a math lens? Like this is how Archimedes saw the world?
No, I actually
Pythagoras.
graduated with a geography, history background.
I was going to say, David's not even a math teacher. Did you know
I
that?
love it.
No, he's not even a math teacher.
Wow.
But that's the thing he's best at.
Yet he's one of the most insightful people when it comes to math.
Well, no,
Insightful, seriously?
I learned math. I took math at university, but I didn't like what I was taking, so I went into the arts
Well,
faculty of
team
arts, took a
arts.
psychology degree and a geography degree, and
Wow.
eventually it ended up in education and
In the middle of Puckatawagan.
got up to Puckatawagan, and then they put me into math because the math teacher wasn't able to teach it.
Wow.
So I have been teaching math for 40 years.
We're going to give you, in 1 minute, can you tell us all about Manitoba and why we should visit?
Well, the problem is I think I am an ambassador of Manitoba, and I've tried to get it across to people that it's a great place to go, and I haven't convinced one person to go. And
Convince
so
them
I
now.
feel bad about that, but everyone's got this idea that Manitoba's got some problems to it with mosquitoes and cold and snow, but it's the most beautiful province. You just have to drive in, and as soon as you drive in, you get into these rolling hills of, it's where the Lake Agassiz used to was bounded by, and so the shoreline is all these hills, and they call them Riding Mountain National Park, and it's all beautiful rolling hills, and then you get into the prairie part of it, and then you get into the river part, and if you go north or east, you get to the Canadian Shield, which is probably the most beautiful part of Canada, with the rock formations and the forest and the lakes and the rivers and the fish.
So why are people...
And if you go north, you get to the cottage country. You go east, you get to cottage country. So you get cottages, lakes. It's just beautiful. And there's no mosquitoes there anymore.
Because they killed them.
They've solved the problem you were telling me, right?
Yes, they moved them to Edmonton.
So why is... Wait, they have... David, so why is it that people don't want to go to Winnipeg? What do you think is the cachet, the reason that people are like, you know what, I just don't want to go there? And I'm including like the hockey players, the everything. Because you, from the way you describe it, it's amazing.
It's for a hockey player. They don't want to be in Winnipeg. It's a small town. But for you, you should go because it's cheap. It's a cheap place to go rather than going to Europe or...
But you told me the tickets are like $1,200 to get there.
Well, I'm going first class.
So
Wait.
there's that.
You're flying first class to Manitoba?
Yes.
To Winnipeg?
Yes.
But he'll make it up by going steerage to Mexico.
That's true. That's true.
It all balances out.
No, it's a cheap place to go.
Yeah.
You can get a cabin there for $900, well, maybe $1,500 a week, right on the lake. Get a boat, get a canoe, go fishing. Right on the
Does the
beaches.
boat included in the rental?
Yeah, it is.
But how would you convince somebody who's living in BC to go to Manitoba?
Well,
'Cause we
I
have
try
most
to
of that.
convince all my students to move to Manitoba.
Yeah.
Because living in Vancouver is impossible, unless you're going to
Yeah.
live at home, right? So if
What's
you
wrong
live
with living at home, David?
Well, eventually you don't want to live at home, hopefully, right? When you're 25 or whatever. So
Yeah, that's when you have to get a restraining order, right?
yeah, so move to Manitoba. You get a house for $350,000. You get a job that pays as much as you do in Vancouver.
So I think when I had a colleague him and I both were account managers making the same dough, but I lived in Vancouver, and he was telling me, well, we were at a meeting and he was showing me these photos of his cottage at the lake, his ski boat. He had this beautiful Audi, and he had just bought a house that he could fly fish off his deck, and it was the builder's house into this river and back. And I was like, that looks like paradise. And he's like, yeah, my house fully furnished was like $360,000. And I was like, pardon? Mm-hmm. And yeah, so it's work to live or live to work. And yet here we are in Vancouver. Like $360,000 wouldn't get you a garage. So
I don't know why people in Vancouver don't want to go to Manitoba. I really don't. I think it's kind of like this air to them.
No, but it's family. Your family's here.
No. But I mean, like, why wouldn't you travel there?
Well, you could travel, yes, but
no one
moving
does.
there's a big commitment.
No one does.
I did for work a number of times.
Yes.
That's for work, though.
Yeah, but you can't live
Go there for vacation.
You don't want to live there because if your family's all here, you want to be around your family.
We're not talking about
He's talking
living
about
there. We're talking about
vacation.
vacation.
Yeah. Would you
a great-
vacation?
it's a great
Maybe
place
they
to go.
need to do a better job and hire you as the ambassador of their tourism, because I don't
That
hear
could be
anything
your
about it.
retirement job,
All I
David.
know is about the mosquitoes, and you said they moved them to Edmonton.
Well, no,
And how
they
did
hired
manage to
someone.
do
They
that?
got rid of the mosquitoes. You could talk to anyone. You might even find it online. I know people like to do that.
Is this like St. Patrick and leading the rats out of Ireland? Same idea?
They
Somebody with
hired a
flute?
guy. He knew what to do.
He had a pan
The
flute.
Pied Piper.
Yeah.
He used science, and he got rid of the mosquitoes.
Was it a
And-
wand?
No, it was science.
No,
It
he
just seems
used
like such a
science.
daunting task.
How do you get rid of
He
mosquitoes?
hired invasive. He brought in invasive species.
Oh, that's a great
bred them,
idea.
and then he learned that mosquitoes, as the rivers rise, depending on the amount of rainfall, mosquito eggs can last for decades waiting to hatch. So as the rivers rise, those mosquitoes, eventually dormant, will hatch and attack humans in Winnipeg.
maul the population.
I was gonna say, what do you do? Like a slaughterhouse?
No,
like
he sprayed all the
Oh,
riverbanks,
okay.
right up to the top, right down to the bottom, and used chemicals that way.
And those chemicals went to the river.
brought in
That's the river where the
dragonflies and things like
Winnipeggians
that, and
drink their
bats.
water.
Yeah,
Brought in
dragonflies, that
bats
sounds
and other birds
about
that
right.
ate.
Okay, bats I get.
You know, swallows and
Three-eyed
bats.
fish now.
So yeah, you can actually, I believe you can just go out and they will provide you with a.
Mosquito
Either you
repellent.
put up something that bats live in, or sparrows, or swallows, or whatever. Put them in your backyard, and they put them all over the city. And I challenge you to go to Winnipeg. There's more mosquitoes in Richmond than there are in Winnipeg. But again, not that I'm going to convince anyone of that.
One thing about you is I can never tell when you're just making stuff up or, actually serious. But it sounds plausible.
It's
Like you,
I
whatever you've
I don't
made
know
up
where, I don't
makes
know where
sense to
people
me.
get that.
It's like
I hear
logical.
that.
I think it's
hear
also,
I think, yeah.
but if you look at the population demographics of Winnipeg proper, there's 31 people and a guy named Gus. So if that's possible to get everyone a bat. And a bat house, then maybe no.
That's correct. Maybe there are mosquitoes around. We're just not seeing them.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough population.
Did you know that Winnipeg used to be a larger city than Vancouver?
Yes. And then everybody left.
Not that long ago.
Not that long ago.
Not that.
long
How many
ago.
years ago?
I would say
Like 100? 47?
I'm not sure of the year when Vancouver became a larger city, but Winnipeg used to be, like the Chicago of Canada. It was
I
where
would
all
argue
the
post-World War II.
beef was harvested, and that's where all the train stations went. It was a hub. It was like the Chicago of Canada. Not
When did that stop?
I would
and
say,
why?
I bet you it's post-World War II.
You think so? But why? Why would it stop all of a
A
sudden?
lot of musicians come from Manitoba, right?
That's true. That's
Long,
true.
cold winters.
The Guess Who?
If I was stuck
Yeah,
in a
we got
building
the
for a
Guess
long
Who,
cold winter, I
and,
might write some songs too.
We've got Neil Young.
Neil Young, yeah.
Who's that guy from that with the big low voice? Can't remember.
Adele?
Anyway, there's a few, but there's a lot of live music in Winnipeg too. So you go out.
People travel to Winnipeg to do their live music because nobody will hear them.
That makes no sense. That makes no sense.
That's exactly my point.
So back to teaching. What made you think you would be a good teacher?
Good question. I tell my students this story, and it goes along with the new curriculum that we're being guided by.
It's so full of malarkey. This one's going nowhere.
I was in grade 9, and Mr. Joseph was our teacher, and he wasn't able to teach the math course. And I was able to learn it. And I was able to teach my friends the math, and he was having trouble teaching the course. And I realized that I could teach. And I taught.
That's it, eh? That was that easy.
No, I realized I could teach. I could teach, students
makes
that
sense.
weren't very good at math. And I taught at grade 10, grade 11. I taught my friends math in the course. And I realized that if nothing worked out, I could become a teacher.
So you had something the teacher at that time did not have, and you realized, wow, this is something I could do
It's true.
as a career.
Yeah.
That's a cool origin
Yeah.
story.
And that's what gets to collaboration, right? So I get my students to, I tell them that if learning from me is their first step, learning at home is your second step, and the third step is teaching someone. And that's true mastery of a subject. So if you could teach someone something, you've mastered it.
Why are you being so serious about this?
Well, no, it's a serious
But you're
topic.
not a
That's why I'm
serious teacher. You're
Wow.
a
You
guy.
are serious. See, I
No,
don't-
he's
he's a
not.
serious
David goes into the classroom and it's a show. Everything he does, everything he presents, every little move he makes.
That's exactly what he's talking about. He's trying to model what his
It's
old
improv.
teacher did so that his students will find a way to teach
But
themselves.
it's all improv.
Well, but I would argue that Bennett's secret weapon here is he's taught many a young kid how to play euchre, which
Yes.
involves
Eastern
a
Canadian
subtle,
game.
yeah, but it's a subtle tactical. It involves counting, and you have to actually really pay attention. And so, my first exposure to this was walking by and hearing somebody yell, "You got euchred!" And I ran into the classroom because I thought this can't be happening. And there's Bennett smiling like a Cheshire cat. And then I, of course, sat down and played for a little bit because I was completely enamored because that spoke to my childhood as well as my time in the military. So yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
an
respect
Ontario
that.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only played when I was in Ontario when I met some other youth from Ontario when I was younger. That's the only time it was a good game.
You were
I just
younger,
don't
John?
remember.
I thought you were born like this.
Yeah, I was.
Kind of like
Just
David.
anyone.
David was born like this. Still is.
Yeah, no, I take teaching very seriously, believe it or not. And I do like to have fun.
Yeah.
And I like to not necessarily entertain, but I like to have fun in my class. And I like to get everyone involved in the class. But I am a serious teacher, and I don't think some teachers realize that.
So what is your
I didn't realize that. I thought
you
it
go.
was all like a showmanship. Like I feel like with David, when he goes in the room, it's like a show. It's like a performance. And he enjoys the fact that every time he goes in, there's something new and something exciting.
Well, don't you, that's part of it, right? That's why
of
the
teaching.
kids remember you.
Yeah, that's what I
and
mean.
Your classes, because stuff happened there. It wasn't just like an everyday routine where they just did the same things. Stuff happened. Something different happened every day.
right.
But that's the funny thing. Like he comes to me and he goes, "Watch this. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to stir them all up. And then I'm going to get them to get the lesson." And I'm like, okay. So I go and I watch, and it's this theatrical show.
Yeah.
And I think David takes pride in that too. I think that's one of those things you kind of go, if I'm going to be here, we're going to make it fun. But if we're going to make it fun, it's got to be theatrical, and it's got to be emotional, and it's got to be this engaging thing, because God knows in 5 minutes after teaching them math, they're all going to fall asleep anyways. So, I mean, it's one of those things, right? That you've got to get them right from the beginning. You know, I hate to say it, but they call it the hook at the beginning, right? And we use that, and we don't actually really do that. I don't think I've ever used a hook in a teaching class. But David seems to always think that it's the most important thing about getting math to be fun.
Well, I think
and
you do more than you think, right?
Right.
You need to get their attention somehow. So that's what you think about when you build a lesson or start a class.
Yeah.
So anyways, you went to university.
You did?
You got an education degree.
Eventually.
Thought he faked it.
Yeah, eventually.
What was your first teaching job, and what was that like? The first day you stepped into a classroom.
Well, and there was student teaching. That counts.
Yeah.
I ended up in an area of Winnipeg called the Brooklands. It's a tough area of Winnipeg, and It's the west side, northwest side of Winnipeg. Not a great spot, but I just walked into the class and the kids were just great. And it was in University of Manitoba. You had to teach an elementary for I think it was 6 weeks, and then
You have to teach elementary.
You have to teach elementary.
Interesting.
And then if
But you were trained in elementary anyways.
No, I wasn't.
I thought you told me that.
No, I wasn't. Secondary teaching was a second year, and you had to do 13 weeks. So my first time was in Pacific, was in a school in Winnipeg, and the kids were great. I remember doing a science class, and I thought I had it all worked out, and I did the science experiment, and
Do you remember what that science experiment was?
it had to do with water levels and adding things. I thought I did it right, it worked out completely opposite to what I thought would happen. So as I was trying to explain it to the kids, and I was kind of all muffled and whatever, then this one grade 4 kid came up to me and said, "Mr. Bennett, that was the best science class I've ever been to." Now, I don't know if that
How
was
much did you pay him?
I don't know if he was being sarcastic or if he was being real, but I didn't know, because he could have been being sarcastic.
But you felt good about that at the time?
I felt good that he had fun. But
How old were you? How old were you at that time?
I was 23, I think.
Okay.
And then I went to my old high school, Grant Park High, and I hadn't been there for 7 years. They didn't remember me, thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
And I ended up teaching social studies and law. And then I was working at the city of Winnipeg, and I eventually got a call and went to a place called Shamattawa, which is in northern Manitoba. It was a First Nations community. And when I met with somebody who had spent a lot of time in the north, they said, "That's not the place for you. You won't be able to last there." It was a very tough place to live.
So you took that as a challenge, didn't you?
No.
Oh, okay.
He told me, and then I said, "Well, there's another place hiring," and they were in Winnipeg at the time, and they're hiring, and I didn't have an interview, so I just went to the door and I knocked on the hotel room door. They answered. I told them I'd been hired by the Department of Indian Affairs, Northern Development. It was a federal government, and they said, "Come on in," and there's a whole group of them, and they said, "You're hired." And this was Puckatawagan. And then I told the people in Thompson that what had happened, and they said, "You can't do that. You can't just walk in and get an interview. You're hired at Shamattawa. They hired you." I said, "Well, I'm not going to Shamattawa because it's a tough place." And so I ended up in Puckatawagan, and I spent 5 of my first 7 years teaching there. It was great. And that was kind of like, I think, everyone thinks people learn how to teach, but you don't learn how to teach at university. You learn when you look at your first class and you look at you.
Absolutely.
And then you realize, wow, it's me and them, and I'm supposed to be delivering something. And it's not just the curriculum, it's the whole thing, right? It's how do you make connections with people, and it was great. And they the second year we came back, a bunch of us came back, they were so enamored that because no one ever came back there. You taught 1 year and then you went off to Winnipeg or something, but we kept coming back. Came back 5 years out of 7, and the community really embraced me. And I just knew I couldn't live there. I couldn't live there forever, right?
But did they embrace you so much? Tell the real stories, though, David.
Did you mistake it for Hotel California?
No.
No. I mean the stories of the bullies and
it was tough. It was tough.
And the initiation, we'll call it.
Well, what do you think you got out of that small town experience that we probably didn't get out of being in a big city? And
hold on,
here?
John. We got to talk about the real stories though first here. No, wait, not what anybody got out of it. Tell him to tell you a good story about the time he was tried to be bullied out of town. Because David, they attempted to bully him out of the town.
Well, it wasn't them.
It was a person.
It was just a few individuals.
Yeah.
Actually, I guess it was my 4th week there, and I was teaching a grade 7 class, and I was at the door. And back then, you didn't graduate. It was up to grade 10, and then you went up to Cranberry Portage to do your grade 11 and 12. So some kids walked by, and they were like 19 or 20, and they were all pretty tough kids, adults, if you like. And they just came by, and everyone was really scared of these people. And they walked by, and
were they a
I was
gang,
at the
David?
door.
Was it like
it was a gang.
It was a gang, yeah.
And they walked by my door, and I was looking. My grade 7s were lined up, and one guy, Douglas Hart, gave me the finger. And I said, And my grade 7 saw that. So I walked down to the principal's office, and I said to the principal, this is what just happened. I don't feel comfortable with this, and I'd like you to do something with this. And then Jerry just looked at me and said, thanks, David. I've been waiting 2 years for someone to come in this door and give me an excuse to get rid of Douglas Hart.
Wow. That's all it took?
Well, the problem was everyone was scared of these people. So Douglas now was kicked out of school.
Okay.
He was in grade 10, ready to go to Cranberry
At the age of
Portage.
20, you mean?
He was probably 19 or 18, 19.
Wow.
He was not a dumb kid. He was a smart kid.
Yeah.
And I lived the next 3 or 4 years being targeted by Douglas and his group. And there was a number of assaults and things like that I had to deal with.
Well, tell them about the one where you were in your cabin at night, or you were in your, sorry, not your cabin, but your facility at nighttime, wasn't it? Didn't you tell me about that one? Where they...
well, that's kind of, I don't really want to get dark. It was a good place. It was a great community. I don't want to talk about the focus on some bad things.
It's part of the story, though. It's part of the story. You got to tell the whole story. The dark, the good, the bad, everything. You got to tell all of it.
Do I?
It's up to you.
Okay, well, no, a shot went through my window, and so I didn't feel comfortable with that. And so
With good reason.
And there was a hole in my window,
no
and
kidding.
I started packing my bags, and I went to the principal, and I told him I'm leaving. And he said, what happened? I said, well, a shot went through my window this morning. This was about 4 a.m. or something. So he came down, looked, and he said, unpack your bags. You're not leaving. And he went to the chief and talked to Pascal Biggity and said that this is what happened and this is who we think it was, because these people have been targeting David for a long time. And so Chief Pascal went to the family and said that if this happens again, I don't know exactly what he said, but what I was told was it's called a BCR. It's a band council resolution where a chief can actually remove a family from a reserve, and first Indigenous community, First Nation, but they can BCR a family off a reserve. And so they were threatened, and I never really was challenged again.
And I would think that, that's, I would guess, has some long-term repercussions too for that family. So
Oh yeah, no,
I would think
they
that's
were
a legitimate,
because once they're off, right? And there's
Yeah.
lots of rights that they have when they're in the community. So, but I don't want to focus on that.
No.
That was all-
But you got to tell that story, because now John's question comes in back at John's question, like what was so good about it, right?
Yeah, it was
Because
great.
we didn't have to deal with any of that.
No.
right?
No.
I mean, we had to deal with
We've
things
had our-
in the classroom,
Yeah.
but not to the extent where it carried on after school was done.
I mean,
right?
here you'll get a walk by shouting, but
No, but okay. Here's
What do you think?
I was applying for a new position after I was leaving St. John's. I was going to be a principal at a school, and I had my resume, and I went to a teacher, and I said, well, my resume is really long. I've been a lot of places, and maybe it's too long. Maybe I should take some things out. And I said, well, maybe I should just take out Puckatawagan out of my resume, because what's that? And he just looked at me and said, that's the best part of your resume, is that you've been there, you've learned there, you've been in a First Nations community for 5 years. And so that kind of just woke me up that, wasn't, lots of teachers wouldn't have gone up there.
No,
at that time.
100%.
At that time,
If you didn't need to, you wouldn't go.
but at that time, you weren't getting a job in Winnipeg or Vancouver.
Right.
It was the end of the baby boomers. All the baby boomers born in the late 40s had all the jobs. The people in the late 50s didn't have jobs. So, yeah, a lot of my friends ended up tending bar or waitering or whatever. They didn't end up teaching. So if you wanted to teach, you had to move. You couldn't stay in Winnipeg. So I know, but what did I get out of it? I had a lot of personal relationships, whether there be teachers that I work with, because you're in a small community and you're in a teacherage and you wonder about what you're doing. So here, I don't do that much, but there I had bridge night on Tuesday. I had Mo Day on Wednesday. I had pizza day on Thursday. We had poker.
What's Mo Day?
Yeah, good
It's
question.
called middle of the week day.
Okay.
Mo Day, and we
call it Hump Day down.
they call it Hump Day here.
Hump Day.
We'd get together and we'd imbibe and enjoy ourselves.
choir practice.
Yes,
Choir practice. Very
practice.
nice.
Just go
Very
through the week,
nice.
and then there was poker on Friday. So we're kind of busy, and then I'd go out skiing with a lot of people on Saturday. So I was pretty active. I had a lot of things going on. Yeah.
What was the biggest challenge for you as an educator working up amongst First Nations? If there was a way to distill it, what do you think what's a solution that could be applied, if that's even possible?
I think we had everything we needed to. The students were coming to school. Back then, they didn't have running water. They didn't have electricity. They came to school for lots of different reasons. But I would say that the hardest part for me was the isolation, knowing that I was in my 20s and all my friends were in Vancouver and Toronto, and they were having parties and they were getting married and they were having kids. And I was looking through a wire mesh window at a blizzard coming in, and it was going to last from October until May.
But no mosquitoes during that time.
No mosquitoes at that time.
That's a good point.
And so, the isolation was the tough part. The job was fantastic, and you were doing great work and making great connections, but it was the isolation that was, and all of a sudden now I'm 30 years old and I come back and my friends are married, they have kids, and so it was time to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
What did you, after that stint, what were you doing?
Well, I moved to Vancouver and I got a house, top of a house in Kitsilano.
Mm-hmm.
Great spot. Kitsilano was fantastic back then. It wasn't what it is now. It was mostly rental and lots of great people there. It's really quite a rich neighborhood.
What are you trying to
Nothing
say
wrong
about
with-
Kitsilano these days, David?
Well, it's not very friendly.
Is it frou-frou?
I don't live there, but I visit.
But
and there's lots
Kitsilano
of
back
shops
then,
and
it
stuff.
used to be,
I don't
believe it
know
or
what-
not, people,
Communicate.
it was all rentals.
Okay.
Everyone rented there.
But nobody had
And
a cell phone back in the 1940s.
this was.
Oh, sorry. I mean 65.
No, this was late 80s.
Yeah, there's no cell phone. Well, maybe some cell phones.
No,
Maybe
no
cell
cell phones.
phones.
But
That's right. So
yeah,
you had to
late
talk to
80s.
people. You walked on the street, you made a phone call, whatever it was, but you had to get out of your building.
And I got a job in Mission as a substitute teacher.
From Vancouver to Mission.
So but it was Hatsick Secondary, so I had to drive from Kitsilano to Hatsick.
No.
Whoa.
Every day I took a job. But
Pack a lunch.
Luckily, the
a
school
freaking
started
cooler.
at 7:30 and ended at 2. So I didn't have to deal with any traffic. I'd leave at 6:30. It took me about an hour to get there, or 55 minutes. I got there, and then after school at 2:00, there was no traffic. Back then, there was no rush hour at 2, and I'd be home by 3:00, and it was not a bad day.
That's not
That is
bad.
pretty good.
And eventually, I got a job at St. John's School. It was a private school in Kitsilano,
And that's how I know David now.
and it was just in a
What?
Yeah. So
do you mean?
David was teaching at St. John's when I was of age to go to St. John's, and I actually had a friend who went there. So David and I connected 20 years later when I started teaching because I had known he went to St. John's. He taught at St. John's.
Oh, I see. You didn't go to St.
No, I didn't go to
You
St.
had-
John's.
you had a friend who
Are you
went-
kidding
okay.
me? Private school? I couldn't afford that.
Yeah.
one of his, I think his closest friend
Yes.
was a student in my class.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was 10 years at St. John's.
So you were teaching at St. John's,
was-
and then you became an administrator there.
Well, yes, I was. They took me on as a junior principal. It was like from kindergarten to grade 7, and I took on that role as a principal for a year, and then they hired someone to come in, and then the headmaster became the junior school principal. So I was only there for 1 year as a principal, but I kind of got the taste of it, and I really liked it. So I decided to go to UBC, and I substitute taught at St. John's, and I did a 1-year program at UBC, and I did my master's in 13 months and got
In
everything.
administration?
Leadership and administration, same course I think you took, some of the same teachers I had.
Yeah.
I got hired by Carl, I think, here, because he looked at my resume, and I think some of my references were like Dr. What was it? Dr. Coulter and Dr. Can't remember. I had two of my. Carl looked at my resume and said, "I know these people.
Yeah.
They were my professors at
They've been around,
UBC."
yeah.
So I was very happy Carl hired me, because at that time people were saying there's no way you're going to get hired in a public school because they're going to have to pay you as much as they would pay 2 teachers, because I had a master's degree. I had 10 years, well over 10 years actually, 19 years by then. And people said, well, there's no way, why would they hire you? But Carl looked at my resume and hired me, and I was back I was back, here now 2 weeks after you got here.
So you were an administrator at St. John's, and then you got your master's in administration, and then you started teaching again at Delview.
Well, no, actually, before that, I left St. John's and I took a principalship at Steveston Academy. There was a brand new private school opening up in Steveston, and we opened it up at
It's now South
what's
Point.
it called?
It's now called South Point.
No.
It's called South Point. Right? There's another South Point.
What's that place on 3 Road and Steveston Highway called?
What do you mean? The Lubavitch Church there? There's a church and a Lubavitch.
There's a church.
There's a church and then there's a Pioneer Church.
No, there's
a Pioneer building beside it.
No, not anymore, David. It's long gone.
Anyway, it's called South something. Anyway,
because there's a synagogue.
So we
South Church.
Pardon?
No, further.
You were your daughter was just down the road from there.
Noah's Ark.
Yeah,
Noah's Ark.
Well, there's a music school, right?
There's a Richmond Music School,
which is kind of funny.
Or Music Academy.
But so I opened that up, and I was principal there for 2 years, and then I don't know how, but you guys wouldn't believe this, but I was used to be a little more idealistic, and I didn't like people doing the wrong thing. So I tried
perfectionist.
I tried to explain to the directors what they were doing wasn't going to work, and they saw me as they hired me, and I'm telling them. Not telling them, but trying to explain to them what they were doing.
Did you do it?
Because I'd spent a lot of time at a private school, correct? So I kind of knew how private schools ran.
Yeah.
And they were running all these private schools, South Point, Seymour Academy, Central Okanagan Academy, and they had schools in Hawaii. They had multiple schools.
They just didn't want to hear you out.
They didn't want to hear me out. So we kind of agreed to part ways. And then I was kind of out on my own, and I was looking for work, and I got hired by Delta School District. I think I subbed 2 days, and then I got hired at Delview.
But what I found interesting is that you did so much time as an administrator. What was it like coming back into teaching, and why didn't you have aspirations to become an administrator in our district?
Well, children. I had a 2-year-old, and 2 years later, I had another child.
Another 2-year-old. He came out. Don't know where he came from, but he was 2 years old all of a sudden.
And so I don't think, having 2 kids, and my wife at the time was working, so, daycare and whatever, and I just wanted to spend as much time with them. And so I knew my work as a principal at Steveston Academy, I was often there at night. I was at board meetings. I was meeting with parents. I was there on weekends coaching or whatever. So I just wanted to have more time. And so that decision wasn't offered to me when I was hired at Delview. I was a teacher. So I just continued to teach.
I don't think Carl was going to offer you his job.
No. I just thought, so and I took on roles as a teacher, and I was just so happy to be a teacher again. I love teaching. And I never really thought of myself going down that road again. I just wanted to teach and be a dad and have time with my kids.
But also you stayed here for 20 years.
Yeah.
21 years.
21 years.
Just like I did. So what was it about being at this school that made you want to stick around?
It was you, John. He stayed for you. Don't you understand this? This is what this whole podcast is about.
Well, I don't think I have to explain that. I think that can be explained by David or Brandon or you or anyone that's been through here, is why would you go somewhere else? I mean, we're a good team. We've always been a good team. I mean, even when we started, we were at the end of a reign of those people that started in the 70s, and they were all leaving or about to leave. And then you and Daniela and Van and Julia were here before.
Julia? You mean Julie, yeah. Julia is
so,
also another one. She was here.
I don't know. It's just a good team. It's a good place to be. I never thought about leaving Delview. I was just happy to have a job here every year. I think I was laid off 5 times. How many times were you laid off?
Once.
Oh, God. Why was I laid off all the time?
There's good reason for that, David.
I know Flom took my job.
The Flomster.
Carl put a load together for me, and it was always a better load than I got. But then this teacher ended up taking my job, so I ended up having to take this dog's breakfast.
You have to put this into context, though. So David
Dave.
Oh yeah, Dave. Sorry, there we go.
Well,
I
you
was
could call him
right.
Dave,
Okay.
I'll be
So-
David, and you can be Dave.
Okay, so Dave, you don't understand. There was this teacher, and again, who was in our school, and unfortunately, every year he would take a job, and then he would go on leave. Okay, and so every year there were teachers like David or Vlad or whoever who would always just like they were salivating. They're standing there waiting. Okay, when's he going on leave? When's he going on leave? Because they were waiting for their job, right? And so by the time he finally would go on leave, all of a sudden, boom, there would be like 7 courses, and everyone would grab a course, and everybody would whatever. So it happened for what, like 5 years straight?
But that was my job.
Oh, yes.
So what happened was I had a job. I applied for it, and I was beat out of that job by someone with more seniority. So I had to take a different job because I didn't want a term position. So I took a different continuing job. So people like Vlad and Harj and other people ended up taking the term position that was vacated by a teacher who didn't show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll tell you the real story later because we're on a podcast. But
So after the, like you taught a whole bunch of stuff, just like I did.
Yep.
I taught the math essentials,
Yep.
but I also taught PE for a bit.
I never taught
You didn't have a
PE.
PE.
No.
But you had a socials. So when was it, how many years did it take before you got, comfortable with, I guess, math?
Well,
because
it wasn't.
that's kind of
Actually, it wasn't. I was taking on these loads, and then I couldn't get a position with math only because we were still a junior school. There was only so many math positions. It was only grade 8, 9, 10.
no, but it started 11 and 12 because I was here when the tractor was going through
the first
library.
3 years.
Yeah,
it was
first
still
3
8,
years.
9, 10.
Yeah, but after that.
So Ed Sue, do you remember Ed Sue?
Yeah.
Well, Ed Sue decided to go back to being an accountant, and he was teaching learning disabilities.
Yeah.
So I asked Carl, could I take his job? And he said, well, no, you need these courses. And I said, well, I'll go to UBC this summer and take the courses. And he said, I don't think you can do that. So why don't you talk to Kathy? So I knew Kathy Guild a little bit. So I phoned her up, and she phoned Carl, and they agreed that I could take the job as long as I was going to take the courses. So I went to UBC, and they said, all the courses are full. You can't have any courses.
Of course.
But I didn't tell him
about
that.
par.
I didn't tell him
tracks.
that. But I did take the courses next September, and I took the 3 courses, and I became an LD teacher, learning disabilities teacher.
Right.
So that was my new branch. I did that full-time for a year.
Oh, you did do it full time.
I did it full-time for a year, and then I there was another teacher here. I can't remember her name. She ended up moving to Australia. Do you remember her?
Oh, Liz Ultrawecki.
Yes, she did.
No, she moved to Australia.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we shared it for
She
1
ran
year.
Delta Access. as
Yes, I remember that in the corner over there. And
Yes,
that's why
that's
they
right.
changed those rooms.
Yeah, so we shared it for a year, and then eventually I realized I didn't want to be in there full time or half time. So I started taking on more math, and then they just opened up the LD LST, and that became
No, that was many years later. You, me, and
well-
Annie did it for a couple of years, if you remember.
Oh yeah, Annie came in.
Yeah, Annie came in, and then you and then I had a block, and then you had a couple, and then and then they only opened it up when MK came.
Okay.
That was when they changed it to LST. But that was there was good and there was bad. I mean, we got 2 rooms put into right, but then there was other issues. So
Yeah. So I was LST, LD, English, socials, math.
drama.
Well, that drama thing that we did with the grade 8s, but that was
Yeah, that was something.
that was something. But it was good though. They did a lot of the monologue and the improv.
Yeah, that was all.
It was all good.
Patty Hillman, the drama teacher at that time.
Yeah.
I was just using her binder and just.
I think
running
some of
through
it was. I think it was Van Chow. Van had some of it too. Miss Chow.
No,
She had that?
She had
Yeah.
drama.
Yeah, because some of it was in Comic Sans.
Her favorite font. Yeah.
Because I think the Hillmans was in that old font.
Well, she
like
used a
the
typewriter. Yeah, she used a
Typewriter.
typewriter. Yeah. I think she actually used a typewriter because she gave me some of her notes too when I got here for English.
I'm sure it was.
I think she actually typed it out.
Yeah.
Like I would not be surprised. She had been here for what, 35 years?
I think 78. I think they got here, right?
Yeah.
I still have a typewriter.
Really?
Yeah, I use it once in a while.
Closet?
No,
Like
no, it's
electric?
It's right beside my computer.
Is it
actually.
electric or is it like a legit, like old school?
Legit.
And did you buy it at a garage
It's an
sale?
Olivetti. My dad gave it to me because it was his from 1970, and brought here by his sister from Hong Kong.
No way.
Yeah, because he was typing business letters at that time and needed something portable. So
it's a portable, old school typewriter.
Yeah, mechanical
How big is it?
typewriter. It's about the size of a little wider than this laptop.
The
here.
laptop. Oh, wow.
And thicker,
It was
much thicker.
typing Chinese characters?
No.
Oh, it was English.
Yeah, it was all English.
Oh, because of the English influence. So there was a
Yeah.
lot of communication, I guess,
It's
with
an
the English.
Italian typewriter.
That is cool.
Well, I got a good one for you. When I was, I guess I was in third year and did a survey course, upper level survey course in Canadian history at UBC. And it was in Heb Theatre. And it was right when laptops were just starting to make an appearance in classrooms.
Yeah.
And the prof at the time was like, no laptops allowed. And everyone was kind of like, oh. And so the next class, this guy sitting in the front row had one of those big yellow electric typewriters. And about 90 feet of
Tick.
extension cord.
That's
And
awesome.
it's the one that sounded like a machine gun when you typed it. It's like,
That has been repeated. I've seen that in like TikToks and
so
stuff.
the absolute best was,
That is awesome.
as he started lecturing, this kid just goes to town on this typewriter.
That's freaking awesome.
And I think at that moment, tactically, the prof right before break was like, I'm never going to ban a laptop in this class again. And then it was a fair game.
That's
We
good.
should have shook this kid's hand, but it was pretty awesome.
That's awesome.
That's terrific.
It's a great story.
Well, mine doesn't need a cord, so there you go.
Dick.
Do you have a typewriter, Mr. Bennett?
Wow.
I
Is that an
have-
ageist question?
I have two.
John?
I have
have two.
but they're in Winnipeg right now, and I've left them behind.
No, you didn't.
But one is an old Royal, and it's probably,
Why would you leave it behind?
It's probably 1945.
David,
and
David.
the other one is
What,
an old.
is it?
Why did you leave it behind?
Who did you leave it with? Is it still yours, or did you give it away?
Well, I just left things
In the house.
in
Oh
the
my
house.
God. You're crazy.
Okay.
Why would you do that?
So
But
some-
I've sold the house.
yeah,
And
so it's somebody else's.
Possession. No, the possession's July 15th. So
Please
I'm
go
going
back and
July
get it.
4th. But that's a heavy thing to carry.
No, bring it
They're
back.
very heavy.
There's
Do
a
it on
thing
your
called the
carry-on.
Post.
Wait, it's a Royal from the 1940s?
I'd say 1940s. Yeah.
Bring it back.
Hey, David, there's
Old
a
black.
I can't say it's worth a lot, but
no, and it's
I mean,
heavy.
but it's
it's
great.
probably I'd say
Yeah, but it's cool.
25
Yeah.
pounds. 20,
So,
Take it to the local
the-
thrift shop.
There's a thing called Canada Post, and they have boxes, and you can actually put that in there with this new crazy stuff called bubble wrap.
But what would I do with
send
an
it
old
to me?
Send
typewriter?
it to here.
Bring it here. It'd be great for his computer class. He'd be like, "This is like the beginning of the computer."
I have a standing desk begging for some real estate to be coveted.
There
Like,
you go.
just to be
other than by
honest,
cannonballs. So,
I use it because it's a distraction-free way to get thoughts out. I mean, sometimes I'll
this is,
handwrite,
you have to
but
press really hard.
I think John's
I
as
understand
well.
This
that.
is not electric.
I understand
Well,
that. Mine's not electric
This is
either.
yeah.
Mine's not electric
Okay.
either. Yeah, it's a
Bring it back.
Olivetti Latera.
yeah.
I sometimes use it because it's like there's nothing else you can do except do the typing.
That's how I learned how to type.
I used to teach typing, and I know you did that.
I did too. Yeah.
Over here at the beginning,
Yeah,
the old
keyboarding.
home row
It's
and
called
keyboarding,
keyboarding, yeah.
and then you stop. But don't these kids need to know how to type with for 8 fingers?
No,
and a
as
thumb?
long as their
Well,
thumbs
during
move
this-
fast enough.
During this ADST rotation, that's what we start with.
Oh, good.
Because I've noticed in the past few years, I think elementary schools, I always do a poll, and there's like maybe one elementary school that they come from where they're still doing a bit of typing, and then the rest, not at all. So now when they come into ADST and we start doing programming and web design, or even if they're writing an essay, it's such a struggle because they can't keep up.
No,
I don't think that's typing skills, John.
Like
I think
a
that's just in
line of
general.
code or whatever. When I get to programming, you have to be able to get past the typing to start looking at the code and understanding.
I know
all
it
of that,
wasn't a
right?
great course to teach, but I thought it was an important one.
It is an important one, and it wasn't a good course to teach, and that's why when Shannon Forbes was here, I passed it on to her because I got all these programming classes, and now I have engineering and programming. It's like, well,
I taught it in Puckatawagan,
yeah.
and I just remember like these were electric typewriters, so they were much easier to use. And the kids were learning, and we were teaching home row and whatever. And I just remember going up to Beverly, and Beverly Caribou was probably 19 or 20, and I was 25.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, you can't look.
Right.
You can't look at your fingers.
Don't look
And
You
she
have to read."
swung a punch at David.
So I just remember I took a book or something, and I covered the keyboard so she couldn't see.
Yeah.
and she started crying. And this was
what a
an
mean
old,
guy.
person not. And I just felt so bad. That's one of the one of the things I always remember about teaching that.
Yeah.
So I said, "Go ahead, look at the keys." I mean, what am I doing? What am I covering?
Well, that's
the
exactly
keys?
what I did. I would take a tabloid side sheet of paper and some like painter's tape or something and just tape it to the top of their keyboard so that they can look down. It was a good thing to do because it would force them to stop looking and focus on which fingers to actually use, right?
Yeah.
David couldn't handle the screeching, the screaming, the crying.
No, it was just tears and stuff. It was just like I'm going, what am I doing? Why am I doing that for? I felt so bad.
Before you start another feud.
Yeah. Next thing you know, David's got a crowbar coming through the front door.
No.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So what made you want to call it quits, let's say? Because, it took you a while to consider it, right?
Brandon's walking out.
Yeah, Brandon's walking out on you.
Brandon needs to go
just when
pick
we
up a
get to the good question.
Well,
What's the good question?
why am I calling it quits?
Well, like, how do you know that? Like, I'm interested because at some point, and we're all interested because at some point we know when it's time, right? When is it time?
It's time when the pension hits the right number.
I thought you were on your way out, Brandon.
I'm on my way out.
It's not the pension.
Yeah.
It's not the pension because I've only been here 21 years, and all my other years were either on, in Puckatawakan I didn't get a pension, in St. John's I didn't get a pension, Stevenson Academy I didn't get a pension. It was all just your own. You put money into an RSP, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, I've got 21 years. So, and I had a year in Squamish. I didn't talk about, but I did teach in Squamish for a year. I'm 65. So if I don't retire now, I think I can still do it. I'm pretty tired, but I think everyone's tired. I come home, I'm exhausted.
Yep.
But I talk to all teachers, and they're exhausted.
Absolutely.
Everyone's on fumes right now. So I don't think it's necessarily my energy or my ability. I think it's just time to do some things before I can't do them. And I think I've told people about, I watched that show. What's that show on TV about people retiring? Zoomer. Have you ever seen the show Zoomer?
It's called Zoomer.
Zoomer.
About people retiring?
Well, no, it's about people that are in their 60s or 70s or 80s. It's a show. The guy that used to started MTV. What's his name?
Started MTV.
MTV, the one in Toronto.
Much Music.
Yeah, Much Music. Who started that?
I don't know. Who started
He started this show anyway. He's on it sometimes. They have great guests. I was just watching it one time, and this one person explained that, after a certain age, maybe you're in 50s or 60s, you have what's called go-go years, slow go, and then no-go. And it's all dependent on your health and your age, right? So your go-go years are when you retire, you have time to travel, you have time to start a new profession, do some hobbies, go back into the gym, do some sports that you haven't done for a while. You have time to do things, right? Golf, whatever, curl, ski. And then you might be inflicted with something or just get, into your 70s or 80s, and then they become a slow go, which means you go to Costco or something like that, right? You do some things in the town. You don't do much. I remember, I could see this with my father, right? He did a lot of things up until he was probably about 85, 89 or something. And then all he was able to do was go to Costco and do a few other things. He was still driving. And then there's no-go, where you don't get out of the house, or maybe they put you in a place where you don't get out, right? And so I just want to have some go-go years.
That's such a cool way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've planned a trip, and I will probably travel a little bit, but I used to be a cross-country skier, pretty good one, and I haven't been able to do that. My boys got a little older, and they got really good. So they just look at, go up to the top of the hills and look to see if I was following, but I just didn't do it enough to stay in shape. So I want to get into that. Friends of mine golf. David, I'm not a very good golfer, so you
guys have golfed together?
We golfed.
Cool.
Didn't we golf?
No, we were
We were going to go.
supposed
Oh, no. Ryan Burke came out.
Yeah, birdie.
But we'll do that. Yeah. So I'll golf a little bit. Used to curl. Some of my friends still curl. I don't know if we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would do curling in retirement for sure.
Yeah.
Really?
It's social, right? Like
Yeah, but you
like
can
golf, and you can do it at your own pace.
It is social. It is social, but it's slippery.
And we'll get you out to the euchre league that we're starting in South Delta.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thursday nights.
Yeah. I used to be in a bridge league. Bridge is a great game.
I would love to learn how to play bridge.
Bridge is the ultimate. It's the penultimate game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So euchre is kind of like a game with trump and whatever. It kind of teaches you how to get into a bridge, and you have other games that have trump and whatever, but bridge is and then you start playing with good players, and you can't really make mistakes, but you do make mistakes because you're learning, and they really hammer you if they're good players, right? It's intense. So yeah, I used to play bridge on Tuesday night in Puckatawagan. We did that for a few years, maybe 5 years. Yeah.
Was the name you're looking for Moses Znaimer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Moses Znaimer. Yeah. So I think he started the show, and he was on it a number of times, and he had some great guests. And so, you'll see it on TV every so often. Sometimes it's not very good. You just turn it off. But sometimes it's an interesting guest talking about what happens after you retire. What do you do?
Wow.
Yeah. And I have no idea.
Well, and I think the success is a lot of people are so consumed by their life that they retire and just sort of vegetate, and that's the danger, right? Like,
you got to retire with a few plans, right? To travel or join a club or whatever, right? I think it's when people just all of a sudden retire sometimes it's for health reasons, or they retire and they have nothing.
Yeah.
I know when my dad retired, he worked for Hobart, so he had all these big machines that he was fixing all the time at Save-On and Safeway and restaurants and everywhere, always driving around solving problems. And then all of a sudden he got to an age, and just because of pension and age, he was like, okay, that's it, I'm retiring. But he didn't have any hobbies, or he wasn't playing golf. He didn't do anything.
So what did he do?
Well, he was kind of just restless for a while, and my parents traveled. But it wasn't until my son was born, then he kind of found more of a purpose as a grandfather to take care of my son and bring him places and see through his eyes, and that was really good for him because he was down the road.
And a gift for you guys too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. But
my father retired at 55, and he died just this year at 96. He was retired 41 years.
We should all be so lucky.
So he basically was retired longer than when he worked.
Right.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing.
He traveled, and he had hobbies. He was a bit of a reader, and he curled, and he golfed, and he cross-country skied, and he canoed, and he did a lot of hobbies. And, as he got older, he gave up, but he was skiing into his 80s. He was canoeing into his late 70s and things like that. So I think that's what being healthy is important, and I want to work on my fitness and things like that. I think you
have to work at it.
The job, I just don't know. Teaching, it's just, I come home and I don't really want to do much.
It is draining. It is draining at the end of the day. Yeah. You don't want to do anything. And also, like you said, when you retire, you have so much time to actually take on something, right? Like, I find that even on weekends, I want to learn how to do this, but there's only so much time because I've got kids and I have to do some marking.
That's right.
And you have to balance it with the stuff that you take home. It's not a job where you can just go home and you have nothing to do. Even after teaching for so long, like, it's gotten better, but there's still marking. There's still report cards. There's still stuff that we have to do on our own time. Right?
And you do a lot. You're one of those ever ready bunnies or whatever. You do a lot. I'm in bed sleeping and I see the light go on my phone, and it's John at Teams at midnight. Texting people to do something on Teams. I'm going, I've been in bed for 2 hours. What have you been doing?
Kimmy keeps hours like Charlie Sheen and Dracula.
It's just Charlie Sheen and Dracula? Yeah. Well, I think I've cut back a lot. I remember a time when I was doing so many things at the same time. And I realized that, well, maybe somebody else could be doing these things because I don't need to be doing these things. And also, when I'm, spreading myself so thin, I'm not doing anything very well, right?
And you're raising kids.
Yeah. So I became more selective over time, and I only want to do this podcast. I'm just doing because I love it.
Yeah.
I have fun with it.
I think it's, one thing I wish I had learned sooner, and I'm only 6 years in, is I was smart enough to cotton on to Waldman because I worked with him at SDSS. And he one day said, I'd like to give you a little bit of free advice if you're okay to that. And I said, sure. And he said, you do an incredible job of punishing yourself. He said, everything you hand out is great, but you don't have to mark everything. Because I felt compelled, like if I was giving this to the kids, this seemed like this, this compact we had. And I realized, because like you, I was working crazy hours. And I thought, man, like this is horrible in some ways. So my question to you, David, is if you had a new teacher coming in, what would be one nugget of advice? What would be a good Bennettism you could give them?
A Bennettism.
Yeah. We should make that
Well,
trend.
Coined it.
They did ask me about what would I talk about being talking to a new teacher or talking about teaching itself and what are the attributes. And I said, well, you want to be kind. You want to be kind to your students, even though I'm sarcastic at times. I don't think that's not being kind. I think it's just being funny sometimes, right? But you want to teach all your students, no matter, often we teach to the kids that with their hands up, and there's 5 kids with their hands up every day. But you want to make sure you reach every one of those students somehow. You can use whatever tactic you want, but you want to make sure. And as for homework and all that, I just started calling it practice. I didn't call it homework anymore. And now I've heard they've adopted that word. Someone came into me recently and said, you should be calling it practice. Well, I've been calling it practice for a long time because that's what you do when you learn the piano or you learn to swim, you learn to play hockey. It's called practice, right? Yeah. We don't mark everything. And if the kids want to practice at home and they want to practice their piano at home, they're going to learn how to learn to play the piano. If they don't want to practice their math, they're not going to be very good at math. I can't be at home with them, but I'm not going to mark everything they do because that's insane. And if that's the only reason they're going to be doing math is because I'm marking it, that's not really what I want to teach them. I want to teach them that math is important. It can be fun. And as you learn it, you feel good about yourself. You gain confidence. You gain success. So, I would just try to have a life. But a lot of the younger teachers seem to have a life. It's the older teachers that seem to really want to make things work in the school. And I haven't been able to do that since I got here. I did coach volleyball for a while, and I was with a union for a while, and I did things. But then I ended up with a particular situation at home where I was raising 2 boys, and that was my job. I got home, and that was my job. Yeah. And so I did my best here, but I wasn't going to coach and whatever. But I think the younger peoples have figured it out. They don't seem to be the ones that are, well, I shouldn't say that. That's a generalism, because then you see Kent and other people that are, working very hard at making sure that their teams are out there and whatever. So, I would just do what you can and try to connect with your students. Try to have fun. Try to make sure that you're having a good time. And some teachers don't. And I just saw something about the union. 1 in 7 teachers don't know if they're going to be teaching in 2 years from now because of how hard the job is, right? Yeah. So I don't think Delview's like that. No. And I think that's what we have at Delview. You said, why would you stay at Delview? I think in some ways we're always alone. We're always alone in a classroom, right? There's no one else there with you. But in a sense, you feel the support all day. You feel support from your colleagues, your peers, Wendy in the office. Even the last 4.5 years with Kevin and Christine, I felt support with them. Not that they've had to do anything for me, but I just feel like they're on my side. I feel, the office staff are friendly and engaging. The teachers are friendly and engaging. The students seem to be, I think, quite remarkable here. There are some ones that really frustrate you, but overall, they're just kind, they're friendly, they're smiling. Some of them work very hard, and some of them will eventually work harder as you get them in grade 11 and 12. They start engaging a little more. So I think it's a great school to be at.
Yeah.
So stay at Delview if you're going to teach, right?
Well, that's why I haven't left either. Yeah,
It used to
same
be.
reasons.
It used to be when we had those books that came out when you got laid off. You got laid off once. I'm sure I was laid off 4 times. But there was books, right? And they had lists of all the teaching, where do you, every school and all the teaching jobs. And one thing about being at Delview, no one wanted to come to Delview.
Uh-huh.
So if you applied at Delview, no one else was, because Delview had this reputation
That goes way back.
way back of being a very tough place to be, tough school. So no one would leave South Delta to go to Delview or leave Burnsview or
Northern
Sands.
Manitoba tough, David?
Well, I think it was. I think it was.
It was at a certain
I
point.
think it
yeah.
was.
I think that was the 80s.
It was the 80s and whatever. So that reputation stuck. So we were kind of lucky because we could always apply in, and there wasn't a lot of competition from people trying to get into Delview at the time. So, so if we hush, we don't tell everyone this, people stay. And I don't know. I think Delview's got a better name now. I mean, you hear people coming in here, the administrators, they always say Delview's got a good name, and
Yeah, and I think we've made an effort to show people what we can do, which I think is a huge thing to changing that reputation, right? Inviting people in and showing them this is what our kids can do, and this is what our staff does, and we do have a different reputation now. Because I talk to people from other schools about it.
and they want to come here.
Not that they want to come here, that they know that there's things going on that are special here. So, all right. Well, what are your feelings now that you're about to step out of here? Because you are about to step out of here.
I am about to step out.
We're on the last month.
Actually, it feels like the longest retirement ever.
Really?
Yeah, it does. It's, I've been, the subject's been broached all year.
Yeah.
It's like I've had to talk about retirement all year. And then, so my advice to people is maybe don't tell anyone you're retiring until about May or June. And then, but it seems to be, it's been a very long retirement. So, I think we're all at the same point. Like, I think I'm getting ready for summer holidays.
Yeah.
We've done a hard year. We're getting ready for summer holidays. And then after that, I won't be here. So September, I haven't really thought about it.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, it feels like a long retirement for you, but, it was good that we knew about it for so long, because I think it takes some time for us to process not having you here, because you've been here we taught together since we started here. So
That's right.
It's been a good journey and lots of fun, I would say.
I think we've had some good times. Yeah, we've had some good times. And I hope to, I have friends, believe it or not, still from Puckatawagan.
Oh, okay.
Do you know who one of them is?
No.
Paul Steer.
Really?
I was in Puck, and 2 weeks after I was there, I heard this voice outside, and he was just being friendly with the principal or whatever. I looked outside. It was a guy with a big Stetson on, and he had come down from northern BC, and he was going to be teaching at Puckatawagan. He ended up moving in the same place. I lived in the nunnery. The nuns weren't there anymore, but I lived in the nunnery in one of the apartments.
Thank you for the clarification.
And the morgue was downstairs. Wasn't being used as a morgue anymore. And Paul moved into another apartment in the nunnery, and we befriended one another, and we've been friends for 40 years now.
Wow. Wow.
And I have friends from St. John's School, still some really solid friends from St. John's School. So I still see them quite often. So I'm hoping I can retain some friendships at Delview, and that it's not over, that I will, I'll still maybe be invited to a poker game if we ever play poker again, or we'll, invited out to some other event. Who knows? Yeah. So,
well, that some of the old staff often come back here, or we see them once in a while, and
more and more fleeting. But
yeah.
that 17 years, Doug Alexander and Ron retired.
Yeah,
17 years ago.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
That is amazing.
And Ken, I think it's 12 years or 11 or 12 years. So
yeah, 12.
Yeah, so we still see them, and there's Thanks for Giving. I'll pop in Thanks for Giving, and who knows? Maybe I'll be a TOC.
Yeah.
If they hire me, maybe I'll be a TOC, and you'll see me once a week.
That'd be terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, have a good retirement.
Okay, thank you.
And I think you will have a good one because I can see that you have some plans.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And thanks for doing the podcast. I didn't really want to do this. I'm not.
It was so difficult to get you to schedule this one.
I know. So
difficult.
I'm not a dancer. I ended up
persistent.
dancing on the dance floor at graduation. I'm not a dancer.
You did.
I know.
Although it was,
I have video.
It was pretty touching. I got to admit, I stood back, and I will admit that I helped incite part of it.
Did you really?
Well, the kids really, you could feel the affection when they announced your retirement.
Yeah.
And I stood up because that's what I think you should do. And I was encouraging, and the kids all willingly. And I thought it was really heartfelt for them to say, like you're an admired guy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you got the standing ovation. You danced for them afterwards as
danced.
a reward.
Yeah.
I don't do that. I don't speak publicly. I'm doing that here. I'm sure I'll have to say something at retirement on the 24th or whenever that is. So I'm doing a lot of things. I'm putting myself out there during this. So I'm doing my best to say goodbye.
You got to say yes more to stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's how you experience the world in your life. So
Yeah.
awesome.
All right, David.
All right, David.
Okay. Well, thanks for doing this. And
Take care. Thank you for doing this. It was awesome.
Yeah, have a good retirement, buddy.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, cheers.
Okay, cheers. Out.